Good morning, this is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. I'm working on a series of videos where I show you how I process the hair from my poodles into yarn and then a knitted garment. One important element in that process is a hackle, which is used to help straighten and align the fibers. I encourage you to go check out my previous video where I made a pair of wool combs. All of these are important tools. All of them were too expensive for me to be able to purchase. So the choice was make it if I want to have it and use it. I made this hackle about a year and a half ago with my dad in his wood shop while he was still able to do these kinds of projects. All of these tools now live with my brother in California, but I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to make a lot of woodworking projects with my dad over the years. Here we're just setting the blade height on the saw stop table saw, and then we are setting the gauge to determine the length of the scrap oak that we're going to cut for this hackle. It doesn't matter how many times I use it or how many other power tools I am comfortable with, the table saw always makes me very anxious. Now, a new hackle made with hardwood can easily set you back $150 to $200, but here I'm only going to spend a few dollars on nails because I am using wood scrap that my dad had left over from other projects. This hackle will be made entirely out of oak. As with my wool combs project, here I'm going to be using my dad's 40-plus-year-old shopsmith for much of the work on this wool hackle. Here you can see that I am using the drum sander. It's really important not to leave any sharp corners on the hackle where the wool fiber could catch. I really enjoy using a drum sander. Now, underneath this table is the vacuum for our Shopsmith shop vac, and so that really keeps the sawdust to a minimum. I'm also not wearing a face mask because the sawdust from oak is not toxic. Some of the more exotic woods, you need to wear a respirator when you're working with them on the drum sander. A hackle is a simply designed yet elegant tool. It only uses two pieces of wood. Here you can see the base. On top of the base, I have marked with pencil the secondary piece of wood that will sit on top of it. Symmetry here is really important, so I have measured and remeasured and marked everything thoroughly with pencils. It will all be invisible once the piece is finished and stained. Now the bottom part of the hackle has these lips that stick out on the side, and that's so that you can have a surface from which to clamp the hackle to the table. So essentially the larger piece is the base and the smaller piece of wood is where I will attach the nails. I'm using graph paper here that I have taped with blue painter's tape to the wood so that I can carefully mark and evenly space where each of the holes will be drilled for the nails. Then it is back to the shopsmith where I have removed the drum sander and put on the drill press. You can see the scrap wood underneath. Even though you can lock the depth on the drill press, it's really important to have a scrap piece of wood in case there is a mistake. Then you don't drill into the table of your drill press, you only drill into the scrap wood. When using a drill press and hardwood, it's important to go slow so that you don't get friction burns in your holes. I also found it very difficult to be as precise as I would have liked drilling these holes. It was not as neat of an end product as I had hoped for, but it's highly functional in the end, so it is what it is. I've never made a hackle before, so it's not bad for a first attempt. I decided to try and stain part of the hackle before I put the nails into it. I felt like it would be easier to get the stain even across the top with the holes before instead of after I added all of those nails. Here I'm taking a small amount of stain and a piece of paper towel, and I am applying it in an equal layer all over. And then after a few moments, I'm going to wipe off the excess. I would stain the rest later in the process, but now it was time to add the nails. Now, each of the nails here were kind of rough with little burrs at the end of them. And so my dad offered to sand the tips of every single nail so that they would be smooth and not snag on the wool as I work it through the hackle. Each nail was slipped through the hole. The hole was drilled so that the body of the nail could go through, but the small head would get stuck. And then to keep it from wiggling, I added a little bit of 5-minute epoxy as well so that everything would be really secure. The epoxy was used not only to secure the nails to the hackle, but to bond the two pieces of wood together. I clamped it overnight and let it set. The next day I removed the painter's tape, and using a scalpel I also removed any excess epoxy that had oozed out from the sides. This looks fiddly, but actually didn't take very long, and it was important to remove any residue of tape or epoxy so that I could stain the wood. More of that same stain. I love the way it makes the grain of the oak really pop. Going back and watching this footage from 18 months ago was really bittersweet. I have a lot of fond memories of doing projects with my dad in the garage, all the way back from when I was a little child to when my dad and I made our first wooden chest together when I was 11 and 12, all the way up until about 1.5 years ago when I did this project with him. His eyesight had deteriorated to the point where he really couldn't work out in his shop unless he had a helper. So my kids and I would often do projects with him so that he could continue to enjoy this hobby he loved so much for more than 70 years. I was careful to evenly distribute the stain all over the entire hackle, including the bottom. Now, you might say, Angela, why would you stain the bottom when the rest is already wet? How are you going to have this dry? Well, there are these handy little triangle or pyramidal shaped blocks that you can get that are really nice for propping up wet objects for drying. Let me show you here in just a sec. A quick once-over to make sure any fingerprints or smears are cleaned up, and then the hackle is left to dry overnight. The nails aren't all perfectly parallel and straight. Some of that is because of the holes I drilled, and some of it is because the nails are naturally not perfectly straight. However, I'm super happy with how this project turned out. It was fairly quick and fairly easy and helped give me the confidence I needed to go on and make the set of wool combs. I'm looking forward to showing you how I use this hackle in some upcoming fiber arts projects. Thank you so much for watching. Please check out how to support the work of this channel down below, and don't forget to click like and subscribe. I'll be back with a regular permaculture video next time. Thanks.